Penguin Random House Audio presents The Voltage Effect: How to Make Good Ideas Great and Great Ideas Scale by John A. List. Read for you by Will Damron. To my truly inspirational scaling partner, Dana, and our wonderful 8 children, Annika, Genevieve, Eli, Noah, Asher, Greta, Amelie, and Mason, who have taught me the true value of scaling. Scalable ideas are all alike. Every unscalable idea is unscalable in its own way. Introduction. Built to fail or built to scale? It was never my plan to work for Uber. To be honest, it had never even occurred to me. In the summer of 2016, I was busy with one of the most ambitious projects of my career. 6 years earlier, alongside my teaching responsibilities in the economics department at the University of Chicago, I had led a team that opened a preschool for 3 to 5-year-olds that also functioned as a living research laboratory, a huge logistical and scientific endeavor I hadn't planned on undertaking and didn't exactly have the training for. While I had learned a few things raising 5 of my own kids, I had zero formal expertise in early childhood education. On the other hand, observing and studying people in the wild has been my lab for over 30 years now. And launching a preschool full of wonderful, crazy kids is as wild as it gets, albeit in a whole different sort of way. Many people believe that the discipline of economics is all about money, or how capital flows through society. But my work as an economist doesn't involve things like analyzing fiscal data or predicting stock market trends. My specialty is conducting fieldwork in behavioral economics, going out into the real world to study the hidden, often surprising motivations behind big and small decisions we make every day. This was why Tom Amadio and other administrators of the school district of Chicago Heights had approached me several years earlier. They knew about experiments I had done incentivizing people to adopt all kinds of positive behaviors, so they wanted to see if I might have any ideas on how to incentivize teachers and students in ways that would improve the students' performance. A town of close to 30,000 people, a half-hour's drive south of Chicago proper, Chicago Heights is a place society has left behind. Boarded-up storefronts abound, and violent crime is disproportionately high compared to the rest of the United States. Today, over a quarter of the population lives below the poverty line, almost double the statewide average of 13% when I first visited Chicago Heights. Unsurprisingly, these economic disadvantages take their toll on children there. High school graduation rates are low, and many high schoolers are at a 3rd or 4th grade level in reading and math. And this, of course, excludes them from numerous future opportunities. Life is an entirely different game without a high school diploma. Eager to get involved in a project that sought to reverse these trends, I teamed up with economist Stephen Levitt, of Freakonomics fame, and Sally Sadoff, my PhD student at the time, in early 2008. Thanks to a generous gift from the Kenneth and Anne Griffin Foundation, we got to work conducting experiments with students and teachers at a Chicago Heights high school. Sure enough, our interventions produced gains in achievement standards and test scores, yet the results weren't as dramatic as we had hoped. We concluded that by working with high schoolers, we had missed a critical window in these kids' development, during which we could have altered their life trajectories. Showing up so late left much of their potential on the table. In fact, it had already been lost years earlier. In other words, we were dealing with the wrong student population to truly tackle this problem. So we proposed starting our own preschool, which would double as an experimental research lab on childhood education and development. We once again received support from our angel donor, a whopping $10 million from the Griffin Foundation, and that is how the Chicago Heights Early Childhood Center, CHEC, was born. By the spring of 2010, we were on to the next phase of our work in Chicago Heights, and were joined by Roland Fryer, then a rising star at Harvard who studied the impact of economic inequality on academic performance, and Anya Samek, a postdoctoral student of mine. From 2010 to 2014, our preschool served nearly 1,500 students annually. The bedrock of our 4-year pedagogical experiment was a curriculum that emphasized important non-cognitive skills that have been shown to have a profound impact on later success in life, such as socialization, active listening, and delayed gratification. Our curriculum of choice was called Tools of the Mind. Crucially, we also had created a new program called Parent Academy, which incentivized parents to involve themselves in their children's early educational development in specific ways. Once the 4 years came to an end, we shuttered the school, as had always been our intent. But we continued collecting data on the children who had attended, and we planned to continue collecting these data for decades to come, to compare it against the performance of children who had the standard curriculum and whose parents did not receive any behavioral nudges from Parent Academy. In other words, we had come up with a hypothesis about improving long-term outcomes for the children in Chicago Heights. We had designed a study to test it, and now we gathered and analyzed the results up to this point, which were quite impressive so far. Our kids were doing great and taking strong developmental strides. Ultimately, our goal was to take the key features of Tools of the Mind and combine them with our other findings to create a new curriculum model that we could expand to other communities in the United States, and even some abroad. So in the midst of all this, when a recruitment officer from Uber called to explain that they wanted to interview me for the newly created position of chief economist, I dismissed the idea immediately. It would be one more set of responsibilities in my already jam-packed life. On top of the Chicago Heights research keeping me busy, I was about to remarry and would soon have a happy but frenzied new household full of 8 kids, along with 2 grandparents. Plus, what did my research on early childhood education have to do with the pursuit of world domination by a ride-sharing company in Silicon Valley? The more I thought about it, however, the more I realized that my research project and Uber had one central goal in common: scale. If you've spent any time around entrepreneurs, you're probably aware that scale has become a bit of a buzzword in the business world, where it typically refers to the process of growing a company. But scaling isn't just the domain of scrappy startups. It isn't simply about accumulating more users or capturing more market share. Defined more broadly, to scale means to achieve a desired outcome when you take an idea from a small group of customers, students, or citizens, for example, to a much larger one. Through my research and time working with policymakers, my personal credo had become that the only ideas worth pursuing are the ones with the potential to make a significant impact on human lives. And translating an idea into widespread impact requires replicating it at scale. The urgency of scaling up important ideas and enterprises impacts us every day, whether it's by protecting the health and safety of a community, improving the viability of a business, or enhancing the education and opportunities of a future generation, as I hope to do in Chicago Heights by establishing a model that other school districts around the world might someday be able to implement. Scale underlies all social and technological progress, since the innovations that change the world are those that reach the largest number of people. A social movement needs to scale to have an impact just as much as a new medical intervention does. But the scaling process isn't simple. There are pitfalls every step of the way, from the moment the seed of an idea is planted to well after you've launched a project, and even once you've successfully replicated that project again and again. Yet it wasn't until 2016 that I realized a secret had been hiding in plain sight in Chicago Heights. For several years, my research aimed at improving kids' educational outcomes had also been a study on scaling. Why it sometimes worked, while other times it didn't. I wondered if working at Uber, a company that had managed to scale at lightning speed to some 70 countries and serve nearly 100 million customers, might reveal new insights that could be applied elsewhere. I also knew that Uber had a whole lot of data, and for an economist like myself, big data isn't just my bread and butter. It's my professional playground.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?